4 minutes. That is how long Rebecca Harris was dead on her kitchen floor, her husband's hands around her throat, her 7-month pregnant belly going still, her heart stopping while he watched. But here's what Derek Harris did not know. His wife had been recording everything for 6 months, and the voice-activated recorder, hidden in that kitchen, captured his confession. "You should have stayed stupid, Rebecca. Like Karen. Like all the others." Others. There were others. Rebecca's heart started beating again. The paramedics brought her back, and what she discovered next would expose 3 generations of killers hiding behind money, power, and a mother who had been cleaning up her sons' bodies for 20 years. But surviving was just the beginning, because when Rebecca went public with the truth, witnesses started dying. Evidence started burning. And her own mother appeared on national television to call her crazy. This is the story of a woman who refused to stay silent, who fought back against a system designed to protect her attacker, who proved that the most dangerous thing a victim can become is a survivor with nothing left to lose. From clinical death to the courtroom, from victim to victor. This is 4 minutes. Value statement plus story meaning. This story carries a powerful message. If you have ever felt trapped, if you have ever been told you are too sensitive or too dramatic, if you have ever doubted your own reality because someone you loved made you question it, this story is your reminder. Trust your instincts, document everything, and never let anyone silence your truth. Your survival matters. Your voice matters. You matter. 4 minutes. That is how long my heart stopped beating on my kitchen floor. 4 minutes of nothing. No breath, no pulse, no life. Just the cold linoleum against my back and my husband standing over me, watching me die. But here is what Derek did not know. I had been recording everything for 6 months, and what I captured from that kitchen floor would destroy not just him, but an empire built on dead women's silence. My name is Rebecca Harris. I am 32 years old, and I am going to tell you how I survived the man who was supposed to love me. It started, as these things often do, with a lie I told myself. Derek Harris was everything I thought I wanted. Handsome, successful, charming in that effortless way that makes you feel like the original person in the room. When we met at a charity fundraiser 6 years ago, he pursued me with the kind of intensity that feels like love when you are young and do not know any better. I was a journalist back then, investigative reporting for the Tribune. I had won awards, I had sources, I had a reputation for finding the truth no matter where it hid. Derek hated that about me. I just did not realize it until it was almost too late. The first year of our marriage was wonderful, or at least, I thought it was wonderful. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way he would suggest I did not need to work so hard. The way he frowned when I mentioned my colleagues. The way he slowly, carefully, methodically cut me off from everyone who might have told me what I could not see. By year 3, I had left my job. Derek made enough money for both of us, he said. I should focus on our home, on our future family, on being a good wife. I told myself I was happy. I told myself this was what I wanted. I told myself the knot in my stomach every time he came home was excitement, not fear. But here's the thing about lying to yourself. Eventually, the truth gets tired of waiting. I was 7 months pregnant when I found the first piece of evidence. Derek had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. He never did that. He was meticulous about his privacy, his passwords, his carefully constructed walls. But that Tuesday morning, he rushed out for an emergency meeting, and he forgot. I should not have looked. That is what the old Rebecca would have said. The Rebecca who still believed her husband loved her. The Rebecca who had not yet learned that trust is a weapon in the wrong hands. But I had stopped being that Rebecca months ago. You see, something had shifted in me around my 5th month of pregnancy. Maybe it was hormones. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way Derek's hand lingered a little too long on my arm during arguments, his fingers pressing just hard enough to leave invisible bruises. I had started documenting things, small things at first, the way he moved my car keys, and then accused me of being forgetful, the way he told me about dinner plans I had no memory of making, the way he quoted conversations that never happened, making me question my own mind. Gaslighting. I knew the word, I had written articles about it, but knowing a word and living inside it are two very different things. So I documented. I hid a notebook behind the cleaning supplies under the sink. I backed up text messages to a secret email account. I placed a voice-activated recorder in the kitchen, disguised as a decorative candle, and on that Tuesday morning, I looked at my husband's laptop. What I found made my blood run cold. The first file was a spreadsheet, client accounts, transfers, numbers that did not add up. Derek was a wealth manager, handling investments for some of the most prominent families in the city. He had access to over $200 million in assets, and he was stealing from them. $3.2 million skimmed from elderly clients over 18 months, small amounts at first, then larger still. But that was not the worst of it. The second thing I found was a phone bill, a separate account I had never seen, a number I did not recognize. Hundreds of calls and texts to the same contact, labeled only with a heart emoji. My hands trembled as I searched further. The third thing broke me. Photos. A woman. 2 children. A little boy around 4 years old. A little girl, maybe 2. They had Derek's eyes, his nose, his smile. And in one photo, Derek stood with his arm around the woman, both of them wearing wedding rings. My husband had another family. I sat at that kitchen counter for a long time. My hand rested on my pregnant belly, feeling my daughter kick, while I stared at evidence of a life I never knew existed. The old Rebecca would have cried. The old Rebecca would have confronted him. The old Rebecca would have begged for an explanation, desperate to believe there was some innocent reason for what she was seeing. But I was not the old Rebecca anymore. I was a woman who had been slowly suffocating for years, a woman who had started sleeping with one eye open, a woman who had programmed her phone's emergency button to dial 911 with a single press. I was a woman who had learned the hard way that the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is when you try to leave. So I did not confront him, not yet. Instead, I copied everything, every file, every photo, every incriminating document. I uploaded them to 3 separate cloud accounts, all with passwords Derek would never guess. Then I closed the laptop and went back to making his coffee. 2 sugars. Stirred exactly 20 times clockwise. The man counted. He actually counted the stirs. Who does that? Serial killers, I thought. Serial killers count coffee stirs. But I made it perfect anyway, because I needed time. I needed a plan. And I needed Derek to believe I was still the stupid, compliant wife he had created. He came home that night in a good mood. The meeting had gone well. A new client, big money. He kissed my cheek and patted my belly and asked what was for dinner. I smiled and told him pot roast, and I waited. 3 days later, I found the plane ticket. One way to the Cayman Islands, booked for the following Wednesday. Just 1 seat. He was going to run. Take the money and disappear. Leave me pregnant and penniless and utterly destroyed. Unless I destroyed him first, I texted my best friend Sarah a code word we had established months ago. Red velvet. It meant I need you to be ready. Something is coming. She texted back a single word. Always. Then I checked my recorder, made sure it was working, made sure it was hidden, and I waited for my husband to come home. If you are listening to this and something feels familiar, if you have ever documented a conversation because you knew he would deny it later, if you have ever hidden money or made secret plans or programmed emergency numbers into your phone, I need you to understand something. That feeling in your gut is not paranoia. It is not you being dramatic or crazy or too sensitive. It is your survival instinct, and you should trust it because I trusted mine, and it saved my life. Derek came home at 9:30 that night, late, which was unusual. His face was tight, controlled, the way it got when something had gone wrong at work. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, always making coffee. He dropped his keys on the counter with more force than necessary. I heard them land, felt the vibration through the floor. "Rebecca," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. I turned around slowly, the coffee pot in my hand. "Yes? Where were you today?" The question caught me off guard. "I was here. All day. Why?" He took a step toward me. "Someone accessed my laptop." My heart hammered, but I kept my face neutral. I had practiced this. All those years as a journalist, interviewing criminals and politicians, had taught me how to lie with my eyes. "What do you mean?" I set the coffee pot down carefully. "I have not touched your laptop." He stared at me for a long moment, searching, calculating, then he smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Of course you have not," he said. "My mistake." He walked to the refrigerator, opened it, stared inside at nothing. The silence stretched between us like a held breath. I went back to making the coffee. 2 sugars, 20 stirs, perfect. But my hands were shaking, just slightly, just enough. "Who is Karen?" I asked. I did not plan to say it. The name just came out. Karen. One of the contacts in his secret phone. A woman he had texted hundreds of times. A woman whose name appeared in old emails I had found. Emails from 10 years ago. Emails that stopped abruptly after a single police report that had been mysteriously dismissed. Derek went very still. "What did you say?" I turned to face him. Something in me had snapped. Maybe it was the plane ticket. Maybe it was the other wife. Maybe it was 7 months of carrying his child while he planned to abandon us both. "Karen," I repeated. "And Jennifer. And Megan. Who are they, Derek?" His face changed. I watched it happen in slow motion. The mask slipping. The real Derek emerging from behind the charming facade. "You should not have looked," he said quietly. I backed up a step. My hand found the counter behind me, steadying myself. "What happened to them?" "What did you do?" He moved fast, faster than I expected. His hand closed around my throat before I could scream. The coffee pot fell, shattered on the linoleum. Brown liquid spread across the white tiles like a stain I would never clean. "You should have stayed stupid," Derek hissed. His breath was hot on my face. His fingers tightened. "Like Karen. Like all the others. Now look what you made me do." "Others?" The word echoed in my mind as the pressure on my throat increased. There were others. I clawed at his hands. My fingernails scraped against his skin, but he did not flinch. He was too strong. He had always been too strong. My vision started to blur at the edges. My lungs screamed for air. My baby kicked frantically inside me, sensing the danger, fighting to survive. I counted the seconds. It was all I could do. 1, 2, 3, 4. I had read somewhere that the brain can survive 4 minutes without oxygen. After that, permanent damage. After that, death. 5, 6, 7, 8. Derek's face was above me now. I had fallen to my knees without realizing it. The cold floor pressed against my back. The ceiling light flickered above his head like a dying star. 9, 10, 11, 12. My baby stopped kicking. That terrified me more than my own dying. My daughter had gone still, gone silent. Please, I thought, not the baby. You can kill me, but please not the baby. 13, 14, 15. My hand found my phone. It had fallen when he grabbed me. It was right there, inches from my fingers. I had programmed the emergency button months ago. 3 clicks to call 911. With the last of my strength, I pressed it. 1, 2, 3. Then the darkness took me. I do not know what death looks like for other people. I did not see a white light or angels or my life flashing before my eyes. What I saw was ordinary, simple, small. The first time Derek brought me flowers, the way he laughed at my jokes, the positive pregnancy test with its 2 pink lines, the nursery we painted together, soft yellow walls, white furniture, a mobile of paper stars. But underneath those memories, another truth emerged. The first time he raised his voice. The first time he grabbed my arm too hard. The first time he told me I was too sensitive, too emotional, too much. The isolation that happened so gradually, I barely noticed. Friends who stopped calling because Derek always had a reason they should not visit. Family gatherings, he always found a way to miss. 5 years of slowly disappearing. 5 years of becoming a ghost in my own life, and now I was dead. But not for long. Somewhere far away, I heard sirens. Voices. Someone pounding on the door. 911 dispatch. What is your emergency? The line had connected. The operator had heard everything. Derek's confession, my struggle, the sound of me dying. They were coming. I felt hands on my chest. Pressure. Pain. Someone counting compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A woman's voice. Sharp and urgent. Come on, come on. Stay with me. 6 minutes. That is what they told me later. 6 minutes of CPR before my heart started beating again. When I opened my eyes, I was in an ambulance. A woman in a paramedic uniform leaned over me. She had kind eyes and braids pulled back in a tight bun. Her name tag said, Jenkins. Did you get my phone? Those were my first words. My voice was barely a whisper. There is a recording. The paramedic, Maya, looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled. Girl, she said, we got your phone, your recorder, and your husband in handcuffs. You did that. You saved yourself. I started to cry. Not from sadness, from relief, from the realization that I was alive, that my baby was alive, that the evidence I had gathered was safe. Your baby is okay, Maya said gently. Heart rate is elevated but steady. She is a fighter, like her mom. Where is Derek? Police have him. He is not going anywhere. I closed my eyes, let myself breathe, let myself believe, for just a moment, that the worst was over, but I was wrong. The worst was just beginning. The hospital was bright and cold and smelled like antiseptic. I spent 3 days there, recovering from the strangulation, monitoring my baby, giving statement after statement to police. Detective Patricia Okonkwo arrived on my first night. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a voice that commanded attention without raising above a conversational tone. She specialized in domestic violence cases, she told me. She had seen everything, but even she looked shaken when she listened to my recording. The audio was clear, damning. Derek's voice saying, you should have stayed stupid, like Karen, like all the others. The sounds of struggle, my gasping breaths, the moment everything went silent. This is one of the clearest recordings I have ever heard, Detective Okonkwo said. Combined with your medical evidence and the 911 call, we have more than enough to charge him. What about the others? I asked. Karen. Jennifer, he said there were others. We are looking into it. She squeezed my hand. You focus on healing. Let us handle the rest. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Derek was arrested and held without bail. The judge cited flight risk. given the plane ticket to the Cayman Islands, and danger to the community, given the severity of the attack. His father, Judge William Harris, was forced to recuse himself from anything related to the case. The media picked up the story within 48 hours. Pregnant woman survives murder attempt. Audio recording captures husband's confession. Wealthy finance manager accused of attempted murder. My face was everywhere. My story was everywhere. My best friend Sarah arrived at the hospital with a suitcase and a folder thick with legal documents. I brought 3 things, she announced, dropping into the chair beside my bed. Dry shampoo because you look like death warmed over. A phone charger because yours is at 15% and that is giving me anxiety. And every prenup loophole in the state of California. I laughed. It hurt my throat, but I laughed anyway. We have a prenup? You did. Past tense. Because that bastard violated about 17 clauses when he tried to kill you. She opened the folder. We are going to take everything, Rebecca. The house, the accounts, his retirement fund. Everything. For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. The next week passed in a blur of recovery. My bruises faded from purple to yellow to green. My voice came back, raspy at first, then stronger. My baby kicked and moved and grew, seemingly unaffected by the trauma we had endured together. I moved into a safe house provided by the district attorney's office. Sarah stayed with me. We ordered takeout and watched bad television and planned for a future I was finally starting to believe in. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following month. The prosecutor, a fierce woman named Angela Morrison, assured me it was an open and shut case. The recording alone is enough to convict, she said during one of our meetings. Add the medical evidence, the 911 call, and the witness testimony from the first responders. He is going away for a long time. What about the embezzlement? I asked. The second family? That is being investigated separately, but one thing at a time. Let us nail him for attempting to murder you first. I nodded. It made sense. Focus on the strongest case. Build from there. I allowed myself to breathe, to sleep through the night without nightmares, to believe that the system would protect me. I should have known better. The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the attack. Rebecca. Detective Okonkwo's voice was wrong. Too flat. Too careful. Something had happened. I sat up in bed. What is it? The recording from your phone. The file has been corrupted. I did not understand at first. What do you mean corrupted? Our tech team discovered it this morning. The audio file has been remotely wiped, overwritten with static. It is completely unusable. My blood turned to ice. That is not possible. I backed it up. I sent copies to 3 different cloud accounts. They are all gone. Whoever did this had access to your accounts, your passwords, everything. Derek. But Derek is in jail. He does not have access to a computer. No, but his family does. The silence stretched between us. His bail hearing is this afternoon, Detective Okonkwo continued. Without the recording, our case is significantly weaker. The judge may decide to release him. I could not speak, could not breathe. The evidence I had so carefully gathered, the proof of what Derek had done, was gone, erased, as if it had never existed. What about the recorder? I finally managed. The physical one from my kitchen. We have it, but his lawyers are already filing motions to suppress it. They claim you tampered with it, that the recording was doctored to frame their client. That is insane. I know, but they have experts, expensive experts, and a judge who might listen. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. Sarah found me like that an hour later, staring at nothing. Rebecca? What happened? They wiped the recording. All of it. He is going to get out. The bail hearing happened that afternoon. Derek's family posted $2 million like it was pocket change. The judge imposed an ankle monitor and a restraining order and ordered Derek to stay with his parents pending trial. I watched the news coverage from the safe house. Derek, walking out of the courthouse in a fresh suit, his mother beside him, his lawyer speaking to reporters about misunderstandings and false accusations. He was free. The man who had killed me was free, and I had no proof. If you have ever felt like the system failed you, if you have ever watched someone who hurt you walk away without consequences, I want you to know that you are not alone. The system is not built to protect people like us. It is built to protect people like Derek. But that does not mean we are helpless. It does not mean we have to give up, because I did not give up. Not then, not ever. I just had to find another way. The first week after Derek's release was the longest of my life. I moved to a new safe house, this one unlisted, known only to Sarah and Detective Ookonkwo. I slept with a chair wedged under my door handle. I checked the locks 17 times before bed each night, and I started investigating. If the evidence I had gathered was gone, I would find new evidence. If his family had money and lawyers and power, I would find something they could not buy their way out of. I would find the others, Karen, Jennifer. The women Derek had mentioned in his confession, the women whose names I had seen in his old emails. I started with Karen Mitchell. It took 3 days of searching through old records, social media archives, and public databases. But I found her, or rather, I found what had happened to her. 10 years ago, Karen Mitchell had filed a police report against Derek Harris. Assault, strangulation. The report described injuries remarkably similar to mine, but the case had been dismissed. The charges dropped, and 6 months later, Karen had signed a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for $500,000 from the Harris family. She had been silenced, paid off, erased, just like they were trying to do to me. I searched for her current address, her phone number, any way to contact her. But Karen Mitchell had disappeared. No social media, no public records, no trace. She was either in hiding or dead. I moved on to Jennifer Cole. Jennifer had dated Derek in his early 20s, back before he learned to hide his violence so well. I found a restraining order from 15 years ago, complete with photos of bruises that made my stomach turn. But like Karen's case, the restraining order had been mysteriously dismissed. The judge who signed the dismissal, a golf buddy of Derek's father. Unlike Karen, Jennifer was not completely invisible. She had changed her name, moved across the country, built a new life. But I found her. A journalist's instincts never really disappear. I sent her an email, then a letter, then, when she did not respond, I drove 6 hours to stand on her doorstep. The woman who opened the door was in her early 40s, with tired eyes and scars on her neck that I recognized. "I know why you are here," she said before I could speak. "I saw the news. I need your help," I told her. "There are others. He is going to keep doing this unless we stop him." Jennifer stared at me for a long moment. Then she stepped aside and let me in. She told me everything. The romance that turned to control. The control that turned to violence. The night he choked her until she blacked out. The months of threats after she went to the police. The money his family offered to make it all go away. "I was young and scared and alone," she said. "I took the money. I ran. I changed my name and my face and everything about myself. But I never forgot. Will you testify?" Her hand shook as she poured us both coffee. "If I testify, they will destroy me. They have money, connections, they always win. They have not won against me yet," I said. and I am not going to stop. Not until he is in prison. Jennifer looked at me, at my pregnant belly, at the determination in my eyes. You really think you can beat them? I have to, I said, because if I do not, he will do this to someone else, and the next woman might not survive. Jennifer was quiet for a long time. Then she stood, walked to a closet, and pulled out a cardboard box. I kept everything, she said. Photos of my injuries, medical records, copies of the restraining order. I knew someday someone would come looking. I stared at the box, at 15 years of evidence that had been waiting for this moment. One more thing, Jennifer added. You should find a woman named Megan. Derek married her about 6 years ago, told her his first wife, meaning you, died in a car accident. What? He has another wife, Rebecca. Another family. She has no idea who he really is. My head spun. I had known about the other woman, the photos on his laptop. But married? Derek Harris was a bigamist. And somewhere out there was another wife who had no idea she was sleeping next to a monster. I drove home that night with Jennifer's box of evidence in my trunk and a growing sense that this story was bigger than I had ever imagined. But the hits kept coming. The next morning, I turned on the news to see my mother's face on screen. My mother, Linda. The woman who had raised me alone after my father left. The woman I had called every Sunday for the past 15 years. The woman I had trusted completely. She was standing outside a courthouse, surrounded by reporters, and she was talking about me. My daughter has always been dramatic, she said to the cameras. She had mental health issues in college. Derek has been nothing but patient with her. This pregnancy has made her unstable. I stared at the television. My coffee grew cold in my hands. I believe my son-in-law is innocent, my mother continued. Rebecca needs help, professional help. This fantasy she has created about Derek trying to kill her is exactly that. A fantasy. The phone rang. Sarah's name on the screen. I answered without speaking. Rebecca. Sarah's voice was careful. Did you see it? Why, the word came out broken. Why would she do this? I do not know, but I am going to find out. It took Sarah 2 hours to get the answers. Derek has been paying your mother's mortgage for 3 years, she told me. He bought her that new car. He pays her credit card bills. She is completely financially dependent on him. My mother had sold me out. For money. For a house. For the comfortable life Derek provided. There is more, Sarah continued. She has been giving him information about you, your location, your plans, everything. I felt something break inside me. Not my heart, that had broken long ago. Something deeper, the last thread of trust I had in the people who were supposed to love me. I called my mother that night. She answered on the 3rd ring. Rebecca, honey. Her voice was sweet, concerned, the voice of a loving mother. You saw the news. I am so sorry, but I had to tell the truth. The truth, I repeated. Derek explained everything. How you have been paranoid. How the pregnancy has affected your mind. He is so worried about you. Derek tried to kill me, Mom. He strangled me for 4 minutes. I died on the kitchen floor. Sweetheart, that is exactly what I mean. You are confused. You are making things up. Derek would never hurt you. I laughed. It was not a kind laugh. You chose a house over your grandchild, I said. I hope the foundation cracks. I hung up and never spoke to her again. Not everyone who shares your blood shares your best interests. Chosen family is real family. Blood relatives who betray you are just strangers with your DNA. I learned that lesson the hard way. I hope you never have to. The stress of everything triggered early labor at 34 weeks. I woke at 3 in the morning with contractions that felt like my body was turning itself inside out. Sarah called 911. The ambulance came. They rushed me to the hospital while I breathed through waves of pain that made me forget everything else. My daughter was coming. Ready or not, The labor was hard, 14 hours of pushing and screaming and praying. The doctors warned me the baby might need the NICU, that 34 weeks was early, that there could be complications. But at 6:23 in the evening, Emma Grace Harris entered the world. 5 pounds, 4 ounces, tiny and red and screaming with healthy lungs that announced her existence to everyone in earshot. They placed her on my chest, and I cried. I cried for the child I almost lost, for the mother I had to become, for the future I was determined to give her. "You saved me," I whispered to her. That night in the kitchen, your heartbeat kept me fighting. You saved me. Emma's tiny hand wrapped around my finger and held on tight. The peace lasted exactly 37 hours. I was half asleep in my hospital room, Emma in the bassinet beside me, when the door opened. Derek walked in. Behind him was a man in a suit carrying papers. Behind them both was a security guard who looked apologetic. I sat up so fast I nearly tore my IV out. "What are you doing here? Get out!" Derek smiled. The same charming smile he used on clients and colleagues, and everyone who did not know what he really was. "I am here to see my daughter," he said. "I have a court order." He held up the papers. I could not read them from across the room, but I saw the official stamps, the signatures. "I also have a court order for a paternity test," he continued. "Just to be certain. Get out of my room. Rebecca, let us be reasonable." He took a step closer. "You have made some very serious accusations against me, accusations that are unfounded and damaging to my reputation. But I am willing to put that aside for the sake of our child." I reached for the call button, pressed it repeatedly. "The judge agrees that a father has rights," Derek said. "Supervised visitation. I will be present for the paternity test. You tried to kill me." "That is your version of events." His eyes met mine, cold, empty, the eyes of the man who had watched me die. "My version is different, and my version has very expensive lawyers." A nurse rushed in, followed by 2 more security guards. These ones did not look apologetic. "Sir, you need to leave," one of them said. "I have a court order," Derek repeated, "and this patient has a doctor's order barring all visitors. You can take it up with the legal department." They escorted him out. But not before he looked back at me one last time. "This is not over," he said. I believed him. The next week was chaos. Emergency hearings, legal motions, paperwork filed and countered and filed again. Derek's lawyers argued for expanded visitation rights. They argued that I was mentally unstable. They presented my mother's testimony as evidence of my paranoia. My lawyers fought back with medical records and expert witnesses and the fact that their client had literally killed me. But Derek had money, power, connections built over generations, and I was just one woman with a newborn baby and dwindling resources. The judge ruled in my favor, barely, supervised visitation only, 1 hour per week, a social worker present at all times. I thought I had won. But winning against the Harris family was like fighting fog. They reformed and attacked from a different angle. Detective Okonkwo called me 2 days after I brought Emma home. "I have good news and bad news," she said. "Start with the good. We found Karen Mitchell. She is alive, living in Oregon under a different name. She agreed to meet with prosecutors. My heart leaped. And the bad news? We went to pick up Jennifer Cole this morning to discuss her testimony. She changed her mind, said she does not want to get involved." "What?" "But she gave me evidence. She said she would help." Something spooked her. Detective Okonkwo paused. "Also, there was a fire at her house last night." "A fire?" "Ruled accidental. Electrical fault. But all her evidence is gone. Everything she had on Derek. Destroyed." I sat down heavily. Coincidence? In my experience, there is no such thing. Karen Mitchell agreed to meet me in a diner in Portland. Neutral territory, public space, safe. She was in her late 30s now, but she looked older, tired, worn down by years of looking over her shoulder. "I know why you are here," she said before I could speak. "I saw what happened to Jennifer. You think they set the fire. I know they did." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "The Harris family does not lose. They just make problems disappear. You survived. I survived." "We do not have to disappear," Karen laughed bitterly. "You think you are the first woman to fight back? There have been others, women who tried to press charges, women who tried to tell the truth. What happened to them? Some took the money and ran. Some had accidents, car crashes, drownings. One fell down the stairs at her apartment building." Karen met my eyes. "You survived, Derek. But surviving his mother is something else entirely." "His mother?" "Victoria Harris runs that family. Always has. Derek's father is a judge. But Victoria is the power. She decides who gets paid off and who gets eliminated. Eliminated. The word hung in the air between us. She has been cleaning up Derek's messes since he was 16, Karen continued. That is when it started. His first girlfriend. He put her in the hospital. Victoria made it go away. How do you know this? Because Victoria came to me herself. Right after I filed charges, she sat across from me, just like you are sitting now, and she explained my options. Karen's hands shook as she lifted her coffee. She said I could take the money and start over, or I could keep fighting and see what happens. You took the money. I was 23 years old. I was terrified, and I believed her when she said she would destroy me. Karen set down her cup. I have regretted it every day since. But I am still alive. That is more than some women can say. Will you testify? She was quiet for a long time. If I testify, she finally said, Victoria will come for me. She will come for everyone I love. She is going to keep doing this, I said. Derek will hurt someone else, kill someone else, unless we stop him. I know, so help me stop him. Karen looked out the window at the rain falling on empty streets. I will think about it, she said. I drove home that night with more questions than answers. Victoria Harris, the real power behind the family, the cleanup crew who made victims disappear. If I was going to take down Derek, I had to take down his mother too. But how? The answer came 3 days later. I was researching Victoria's background when I stumbled across an old news article, 20 years old, a brief mention of a domestic disturbance at the Harris family home. Victoria's first husband, before she married Judge William Harris, had been arrested for assault. The victim was not named, but the article mentioned she was his wife. I dug deeper, found more articles, more hints, more pieces of a puzzle that went back decades. Victoria had been in an abusive marriage. She had escaped, started over, married a powerful man who could protect her, but somewhere along the way, the victim had become the accomplice. The woman who survived abuse had raised a son who perpetuated it. I did not feel sorry for her. You do not protect monsters because you were once hurt by one, but I understood her now. Understood what I was up against. A woman who had learned that power was the only protection. A woman who would do anything to keep her family safe, no matter how many bodies piled up. I was going to need help. I called Detective Okonkwo, told her everything I had learned about Victoria, about the pattern of disappearing witnesses, about the fire at Jennifer's house. This is bigger than one domestic violence case. I said, I said. This is a criminal conspiracy. I know, she replied, but proving it is another matter. The Harris family has been covering their tracks for decades. Then we need to make them slip. We need to do something they do not expect. What do you have in mind? I thought about it. About Karen hiding in Oregon. About Jennifer's burned house. About my mother on television calling me crazy. They control the narrative, I said. They always have. They pay people off. They destroy evidence. they make problems disappear. Right. So what if I became too big to disappear? What if I told my story to everyone, not just the police, not just the courts, everyone? You mean go public, I mean go viral. I wrote the thread at 3 in the morning while Emma slept in her crib beside me. Every word felt like a weapon, every sentence a piece of ammunition. My name is Rebecca Harris. 6 weeks ago, my husband strangled me until my heart stopped. I was dead for 4 minutes. And since then, his family has done everything in their power to silence me. I started from the beginning. The charming courtship, the gradual isolation, the gaslighting that made me question my own mind. I wrote about the night I almost died, about the recording that was mysteriously wiped, about my mother appearing on television to call me crazy, about witnesses who had been silenced or scared into silence. I named names. Derek Harris, Victoria Harris, Judge William Harris. I included photos, documents, everything I had gathered that had not been destroyed. And at the end, I wrote this: if I disappear, you know who did it. If something happens to me, if I have an accident or a sudden illness, or I am found dead from suicide, you will know the truth. The Harris family does not let victims tell their stories, but I am telling mine, and now millions of people have heard it. I hit publish at 4:17 in the morning. By 6, the thread had 10,000 views. By noon, it had 1 million. By evening, my name was trending nationwide. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages from other survivors, media requests from every major network, lawyers offering to represent me pro bono, and from the Harris family, complete silence. For 3 days, they said nothing, did nothing, probably scrambling behind closed doors, trying to figure out how to control a narrative that had spiraled beyond their reach. Then Victoria Harris appeared on television. I watched her press conference with Sarah beside me, both of us barely breathing. Victoria stood at a podium, perfectly composed, surrounded by lawyers and publicists. She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. My family is being victimized by a disturbed woman, she said. Rebecca Harris has a history of mental illness. Her accusations are completely fabricated. My son is innocent, and we will prove it in court. A reporter raised his hand. Mrs. Harris, what about the allegations of witness intimidation? The fire at Jennifer Cole's house? Baseless conspiracy theories. Victoria's voice was steady. We are cooperating fully with law enforcement. We have nothing to hide. Another reporter? What about the claims that your family has paid off previous victims? We do not dignify lies with a response. Victoria looked directly into the camera. The only real victim here is my son, and we will fight these false accusations with everything we have. She walked away without taking more questions. They are scared, Sarah said. That is what scared looks like when you are rich enough to afford professional composure. I was not so sure. Victoria had been managing crises for decades. She would not go down without a fight. The fight came sooner than I expected. 2 days after Victoria's press conference, Karen Mitchell was found dead in her apartment. The police ruled it suicide, pills and alcohol, a note that said she could not live with the guilt anymore. I did not believe it for a second. Detective Okonkwo called me that night. Her voice was grim. Karen is dead, she said. I know. I saw the news. There is more. Jennifer Cole's house fire. We found evidence of accelerant. It was arson. Can you prove who did it? Not yet. But Rebecca, you need to be careful. These people are not just willing to pay off witnesses anymore. They are willing to kill them. I looked at Emma, sleeping in her crib, at her tiny hands and peaceful face. I am not going to stop, I said. I know. Just stay alive long enough to finish this. I was about to hang up when something else occurred to me. Detective. Derek's other wife, Megan. Have you found her? We are looking, but she seems to have gone underground. Find her, I said. She might be the key to everything. Megan Harris found me first. She showed up at my safe house on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks after Karen's death. I did not know how she got the address. I did not ask. She was in her mid-30s, blonde, put together in that way that suggests money and time and careful attention. She looked like exactly the kind of woman Derek would choose. Polished, perfect, easily controlled, but her eyes told a different story. Red-rimmed, exhausted, the eyes of a woman whose world had just collapsed. "You are Rebecca," she said, "and you are Megan. I saw your thread." She laughed bitterly. "My husband's first wife, back from the dead, except he told me you died in a car accident 5 years ago. He is good at lying. He is good at everything, except being human." She walked into my living room like she had been there before, looked around at the sparse furniture, the baby supplies, the evidence of a life stripped down to essentials. "I have 2 children with him. Did you know that? I saw the photos on his laptop. A boy and a girl. They look just like him." Megan's voice cracked. "Every time I see their faces now, I see his." I did not know what to say, so I said nothing. She sat down heavily on my couch. "I did not know. I need you to understand that. Whatever you think of me, I did not know what he was. I believe you. Do you? Because I am not sure I would believe me." I sat across from her, studied her face, saw the same shell shock I had felt when I first learned the truth. "He told you I died," I said. "What else did he tell you?" "That his first marriage was tragic but brief, that he was heartbroken but ready to love again, that I was the one who could heal him." She laughed again. "God, I actually believed that. I thought I was special. We all think we are special. That is how they get us." Megan reached into her purse, pulled out a folder thick with papers. "I started digging after I saw your thread," she said, quietly, carefully, without letting him know. "And I found things, bank accounts I did not know existed, properties in other countries. And these," she handed me the folder. Inside were photos. A woman I did not recognize, bruises on her face, her arms, her neck. Medical records documenting multiple injuries over several years. "Who is this?" "Victoria Harris." Megan's voice was quiet. "Derek's mother. 30 years ago, before she married the judge." I stared at the photos, at the woman who had become my enemy, at the victim she had once been. "She was in an abusive marriage," Megan continued. "Her first husband nearly killed her. She escaped, married Judge Harris, built a life. But look at the dates on those medical records. Look at when the abuse started." I looked. The first injury was documented when Victoria was 23 years old. The last was when she was 27. 4 years, I said. 4 years of hell. And then she got out, married money, power, protection. Megan met my eyes, but she did not stop the cycle. She just found a way to control it. She raised Derek to be like his father. Worse. She raised him to believe he could do anything and she would clean up the mess. She created the monster, and she has been protecting him ever since. I sat back. Let the implications wash over me. Victoria Harris was not just covering up her son's crimes. She was perpetuating a cycle of abuse that went back generations, a cycle she had once suffered from, a cycle she now protected. "Why are you showing me this? Because I am done." Megan's voice hardened. "I spent 6 years married to a monster. I had his children. I let him into my life, my bed, my family, and the whole time he was planning to do to me what he did to you. I found the life insurance policy, Rebecca. $2 million. With me as the beneficiary if I died. He was going to kill you. Eventually. When he got bored. When I asked too many questions. When I became inconvenient." She stood up. "I am going to testify against Derek, against Victoria, against all of them. I have documents. I have recordings. I have enough to bury that entire family. They will come after you. Let them try. I have money now. I have lawyers, and I have absolutely nothing left to lose. We stood there, two women who had loved the same monster, two wives who had nearly become two corpses. "Welcome to the club," I said. "We have matching trauma. Do we have t-shirts? Not yet, but we do have a court date." The trial began on a cold morning in March, 8 months after Derek Harris strangled his pregnant wife to death. The courthouse was surrounded by media, cameras, reporters, satellite trucks from every major network. My viral thread had turned this into the most watched domestic violence case in decades. I sat in the front row of the gallery with Sarah beside me. Emma was safe at home with a private security guard and two of Sarah's most trusted friends. Megan sat on my other side. We had become unlikely allies over the past weeks. Two women bonded by shared trauma and a common enemy. Derek was led in wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked thinner than I remembered. Prison had not agreed with him. Good, I thought. Let him suffer. Victoria sat behind the defense table, composed, regal, every hair in place. She did not look at me. The prosecutor, Angela Morrison, had built a devastating case. First, she presented my medical evidence. Photos of my bruised throat, expert testimony explaining that the injuries were inconsistent with a fall or self-harm. Documentation of the 4 minutes my heart had stopped. Then she called the first responders. Maya Jenkins, the paramedic who had saved my life, described the scene in clinical detail. The marks on my neck, my words when I regained consciousness, my terror when I realized Derek might still be nearby. Then came the witness testimony. Jennifer Cole, despite her fear, had agreed to testify after all. The fire that destroyed her evidence had destroyed her fear too. "He choked me until I passed out," she said on the stand. Then he stood over me and watched, like he was curious, like he wanted to see what death looked like. Megan testified next. She described finding my viral thread, realizing her husband had lied about everything, discovering the life insurance policy with her name on it. "He was going to kill me," she said, "just like he tried to kill Rebecca, just like he killed Karen. It was only a matter of time." The prosecutor saved the best for last. She called Victoria Harris to the stand. I watched Derek's mother walk to the witness chair, watched her take the oath, watched her arrange her face into an expression of maternal concern. "Mrs. Harris," the prosecutor began, "how would you describe your relationship with your son?" "Close. Loving. I have always supported Derek. Supported him how? In every way a mother should. Financially, emotionally. I want what is best for him." Angela picked up a document from her table. "Mrs. Harris, do you recognize this?" Victoria looked at the paper. Her composure flickered. "Just slightly. I do not believe so. This is a wire transfer for $500,000 made from an account controlled by you to a woman named Karen Mitchell. It is dated 2 weeks after Karen filed assault charges against your son. Can you explain this? I do not recall that transaction." The prosecutor produced another document. "And this is a payment to a security firm called Digital Shield, made 3 days before Rebecca Harris's audio recording was remotely erased. That firm is owned by a shell company traced back to your family trust." "Objection." Derek's lawyer stood. "This is speculation." "Your Honor," the prosecutor continued, "I have documentation linking Mrs. Victoria Harris to witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to cover up multiple violent crimes committed by her son over a 20-year period." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Victoria's composure finally cracked. "I was protecting my son," she shouted. "You do not understand what it is like. You do not know what I have sacrificed." "What have you sacrificed, Mrs. Harris?" The prosecutor's voice was calm. "Karen Mitchell, Jennifer Cole's home, Rebecca Harris's life. You have no idea what that boy has been through. What he has been through? Angela turned to the jury. Let me tell you what Derek Harris has been through. He was raised to believe that women are disposable, that violence is acceptable, that money can make any problem disappear, and his mother made sure of it. She produced the final piece of evidence, the medical records Megan had given me, Victoria's own documentation of abuse from decades ago. Victoria Harris was herself a victim of domestic violence, the prosecutor said. For 4 years, she endured what her son later inflicted on others. She escaped. She survived. But instead of breaking the cycle, she perpetuated it. She raised a predator and protected him at all costs. Victoria's face went pale. The jury stared at her, at the photos of her bruises from 30 years ago, at the woman who had become exactly what she once feared. 3 generations, the prosecutor concluded. Victoria's first husband abused her. Her second husband, Judge William Harris, covered up crimes for his stepson. And Derek continued the legacy of violence. This family has been destroying women for decades. It ends today. The deliberation took 4 hours. Derek was convicted on all counts: attempted murder, assault, bigamy, obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced him to 45 years to life. Victoria was convicted separately: conspiracy, obstruction, accessory after the fact. She received 15 years. When they led Derek away in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time. "This is not over," he said. The same words he had spoken in my hospital room, the same threat he had been making for months. I smiled at him. It was not a kind smile. "Yes, it is," I said. "Goodbye, Derek." I never saw him again. 2 years later, I stood on a stage in front of 300 people at a domestic violence awareness conference. My book had just been published, 4 Minutes, A Survivor's Guide to Leaving. It had debuted at number 4 on the bestseller list and was climbing. More importantly, I had founded a nonprofit called First Response. We helped survivors document their abuse safely, connected them with legal resources, and provided emergency funds for women trying to escape. I looked out at the audience: survivors, social workers, law enforcement, advocates, people who understood. People asked me why I did not leave sooner, I said into the microphone, why I stayed with a man who hurt me. And I used to struggle with that question, used to think there was something wrong with me. I paused, let the silence stretch. But I have learned that leaving is the most dangerous time, the most likely time to be killed. I did not stay because I was weak. I stayed because some part of me understood that leaving might cost me my life. I looked at the faces watching me, some nodding, some crying, some with expressions I recognized too well. So the question is not, why did I stay so long? The question is, how did I survive leaving? And the answer is, I did not do it alone. I had people who saw me when I was invisible, who believed me when he called me crazy, who stood beside me when the whole system seemed designed to protect him instead of me. I talked for 20 minutes about the warning signs, about documentation, about emergency plans and safety buttons, and the difference between love and control. At the end, I said this: if you are watching this and something feels familiar, if you have ever documented a conversation because you knew he would deny it later, if you have ever hidden money or made secret plans or programmed emergency numbers into your phone, I need you to understand something. That feeling in your gut is not paranoia. It is not you being dramatic or crazy or too sensitive. It is your survival instinct. And you should trust it, because I trusted mine, and it saved my life. After the speech, a young woman approached me, maybe 22 years old, bruises barely hidden under makeup. I recognized her immediately. I had been her once. "My boyfriend chokes me during arguments," she whispered. He says it is not a big deal, that he is just showing me who is in control. I took her hands in mine. It is a big deal, I said. Strangulation is one of the biggest predictors of homicide and domestic violence situations. You need to leave now, today. But I love him. I loved Derek too, and he tried to kill me. Love does not make abuse acceptable. I gave her my card, the number for our hotline, the name of a shelter where she could go tonight. I do not know if she used them. I never found out, but I hoped. That evening, I went home to the small house I had bought with my book advance. My house, my money, my life. Emma met me at the door. She was 2 years old now, with her father's eyes, but my determination. She did not know about Derek. Would not know for years. Someday, I would tell her the truth, but not yet. Mama, she said, holding up a picture she had drawn. Purple and green scribbles that might have been flowers or monsters or abstract art. Pretty. So pretty, I agreed, just like you. I picked her up, held her close, felt her heartbeat against my chest. We had survived, both of us, against all odds, against a system that protected monsters, against a family that destroyed women, against a man who had tried to erase us both. I thought about Derek in prison, about Victoria in prison, about Karen and Jennifer and all the women who had come before me, the ones who did not survive, the ones who never got to tell their stories. I would tell their stories. I would make sure none of them were forgotten. But tonight, I was just a mother, holding my daughter, watching the sun set through my window. I had been dead for 4 minutes, but I had been alive every minute since. Not because a man saved me, not because the system protected me, because I saved myself. I documented, I prepared, I fought. And when they tried to silence me, I became too loud to ignore. Emma fell asleep in my arms. I carried her to her room, tucked her into bed, kissed her forehead. I love you, I whispered, and I am going to teach you what real love looks like, what healthy relationships feel like. No one gets to hurt you and call it love. Remember that. She did not answer. She was too young to understand, but someday she would. Someday she would know exactly who her mother was and what her mother survived. I checked the locks once, just once, not 17 times anymore, just once. Then I went to bed and slept through the night. No nightmares, no counting seconds, no fear, just peace, and that was worth everything. If you recognize your life in my story, I need you to know something. You are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining it. Start today. Tell one person. Save one piece of evidence. Put $1 in your escape fund. You are worth saving. And you are strong enough to save yourself. I promise. If this story resonates with you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please share it. Your like helps this message reach more people who might be suffering in silence right now. Your comment lets us know these stories matter to you. And if you want more content that empowers, inspires, and reminds you of your own strength, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Together, we can make sure no survivor ever feels alone. Now, let us begin. Closing statement. Thank you for staying until the end. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring meaningful lessons and genuine value to your life. We believe stories have the power to heal, to inspire, and to save lives. If this one touched your heart, carry its message with you. And remember, you are stronger than you know. Until next time.